I use ketones all the time, so I think there are use cases for them, but they're not a ergogenic aid. You don't take it before exercise. It's probably doesn't seem like it's going to help you based on the research. In some cases, there have been performance decrements that have shown, especially during high intensity exercise.
Welcome back to Fuel In Sessions. I am your host, Scott Tyndall, and today I am joined by a special guest. His name is Brady Holmer. He hosts, he does a number of things actually. He has a epic newsletter that I would 100% recommend that you subscribe to. It's called Physiologically Speaking. It is a Substack newsletter. He also writes for another newsletter, which is called Run Long, Run Healthy. It's a newsletter. It's also on YouTube and can be found on Apple Podcasts. He also has another little hat where he is the research or the lead researcher for Found My Fitness, Dr. Rhonda Patrick's business. So most of the research that she is talking about, he assists her with ensuring that the information is accurate and reliable and up to date. And above all of that, he's also a pretty bloody good runner. So he's an avid runner. He talks about his running. He did an excellent Road to Boston newsletter, which I followed avidly. And he actually ran his PB, which was 2 hours and 24 minutes and 26 seconds. So without further ado, Brady, welcome to Fuel In Sessions.
Scott, thanks for that awesome introduction. And yeah, the marathon training, I think, will maybe play into what we're going to talk about today, because I did document, the entire process and a lot of the fueling strategies, nutritional stuff. I documented along with it. That helped me to PR at Boston. So I'm excited to talk about things today, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, mate, that sort of series around your Road to Boston was very in-depth and really interesting to read, actually. I mean, I was amazed at the total volume you did. To be honest, when I looked at my own marathon training, I was like, oh, God, no wonder he runs about 45 minutes faster. But before we do that, I know I gave an introduction, but do you want to just give a quick background about your education as well? Because I think that's really important for listeners to understand where you're coming from an academic perspective.
Sure. I have an undergraduate degree in exercise science, kinesiology. Maybe some people kind of know it by another name. It's called different things depending on what university you go to. And then I have a master's degree in human performance from the University of Florida. I graduated a few years ago now. And so human performance, I guess people can broadly think about that as, yes, human physiology, but also sort of a little bit of strength and conditioning. I'm not a coach. I'm not a strength and conditioning specialist, but I do have some background in that, medical physiology. So really, I think I like to refer to myself as a human performance expert versus just a exercise physiologist. And that's because I'm very interested in exercise, but I'm also interested in, and as anybody who reads kind of my Substack newsletter and maybe listens to the podcast will know, I'm interested in a lot of things around nutrition and longevity. And I think all of that can kind of fall under this umbrella of human performance. And so it's really what I just enjoy reading about, talking about, learning about every day. So as far as my education background, yeah, that's it. Exercise scientist at the heart. I don't actively right now do any research, but I have a lot of, research experience. I've done lots of kind of clinical trials, that run hundreds of VO2 max tests on participants, which has always been fun, and have some experience with some more technical measures of heart health, endothelial function. So all that I learned during grad school. So kind of good understanding of like what goes into science, but also just enough knowledge to sort of read and interpret science as well. And that's what I really enjoy doing.
Perfect. And I think because, there is a lot of talk around this at the moment. I can think of Professor Stu Phillips, and he's pretty adamant, and he does some pretty punchy posts around like the difference between doing your research or doing the research and reading the research. And I think, it's really nice to hear that you've done the research, you also avidly read the research. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is I think it'll be a really interesting topic for everyone, because we're just going to have a conversation around a few key topics that recently caught my eye on your Substack newsletter. And we're going to go a little off piste. I will come back to your Boston marathon if we've got time. Otherwise, we'll cover it on another one. But I thought something that caught my eye the other day, which isn't always talked about with athletes, but it was alcohol. And it was a recent update in, I believe, the American Heart Association. Is that correct? Their position stand. Do you want to just give us sort of a brief overview of what happened and then your take on what the update to that position stand was regarding alcohol and heart disease?
The alcohol stuff is always so interesting to me because, as you probably know, Scott, there's like a lot of controversy around it right now. And, both from like an athletic standpoint, but also just a public health, you have, guys like Huberman who are kind of very anti-alcohol, but very evidence-based in their interpretation of it. Rhonda and I even put together a podcast on alcohol and released that a few months ago, just kind of breaking down the data. And this new scientific statement was an update just to kind of say, like, here's the most recent literature on how alcohol affects heart health. So just a brief background on it. There's kind of this long-standing belief with alcohol and heart health that moderate, light and moderate drinking is probably neutral for the heart health, not necessarily bad. And in some cases, which I think is kind of not the case that what most people believe now, that it might even be protective for heart health. So having a glass of wine, a few glasses of wine a week, it'll protect your heart. I don't think anybody really believes that now. There's still studies showing an association. Couple glasses of wine, maybe even one per day, isn't necessarily that bad, but nobody's endorsing wine for heart health at this point.
Apart from David Sinclair, maybe.
Oh, that's right. He still thinks resveratrol is heart healthy, I guess.
Yeah, he's been called out a lot on his science of recent. But anyway, I digress.
He's got a lot of hot takes lately. So this new scientific statement, I think they put together kind of the latest evidence. And in general, I think, if I could break it down into kind of its key points, I still think they would suggest, moderate and very light drinking. So probably, 1 to 2 glasses of wine per day or a glass of beer per day max, basically 1 to 2 standard drinks per day. Doesn't necessarily seem to be detrimental. And that's from like an observational study perspective, which always brings with it the problems of, the healthy user bias. Maybe people who drink moderately are able to kind of have other healthier lifestyle habits. And so that's kind of like, there's this association. Do we know how strong it is? But, risks for coronary heart disease, atrial fibrillation, heart failure, those seem to be neutral compared to not drinking at 1 to 2 drinks per day. Pretty much based on this newer evidence in the statement, anything above that seems to elevate the risk. So I think that's a little bit new, because before it would have been, I think it was a little bit higher in terms of what was the kind of acceptable threshold. Now it seems that anything above like 1 to 2 drinks per day seems to carry these negative risks for heart health. In terms of, and then obviously when you get to moderate drinking, heavy drinking, there's a dose response relationship, obviously. So the more one drinks in any particular week, the greater the risk for basically any adverse heart condition that you could think of.
Can I ask a question? Because everyone, I think the 1 to 2 drinks is always like, what are we talking about here? Like volume, so people understand.
Yeah, defining drinks is pretty straightforward. So it's a standard drink. So that would be a 5-ounce glass of wine, a 12-ounce can of beer, a regular beer. So if you're drinking a hazy IPA that's 10%, then that would kind of be like 2, I guess, instead of, so a standard beer, 4 to 5% alcohol, like a shot of liquor, hard liquor, something like that. So your standard drink. And, that's an important point I think that you bring up, because, if you go to most places and get a pour of wine, it's not going to be 5 ounces. It's probably going to be double that. So 1 glass of wine might actually be 2 glasses. So we're talking a standard drink here, which I believe is 14 grams of alcohol, at least in the United States. I believe it is 12 in Europe and some other countries. So that's what defines a standard drink based on their measures.
Okay, and that would include what, a shot of alcohol, of spirits would be
exactly, like a shot
standard
of
drink.
Spirits.
Okay, I think it's good just to sort of, so people understand, because I think it was certainly in Australia, and I can think of my group of friends, probably when they hear one of those drinks and any more than one of those drinks per day could actually have an adverse health impact on them. So
I think so too, and I think it's important that these health organizations continue to update, because 1 to 2 drinks per day, I know drinking culture, people think it's changing, but it's pretty standard, I think, for most people. And, 2 to 3 even was once seen as kind of a moderate or safe like level of drinking. And I don't think, at least for heart health, seems to be safe. But there's other kind of convincing evidence on brain health and cancer too, that anything above like 1 to 2 per day probably just isn't good for heart health. So, and again, I think important to note that dose response relationship. And I wrote about the statement and kind of summarized all their evidence. And the only thing that I pointed out that I think they could have been a little bit more stringent on is they just didn't really seem to say. And I think most of the evidence to date would point to this. And before I say this caveat with like, I drink, I have a couple drinks per week. I'm not anti-alcohol. I love a beer every now and then. I love a glass of wine. So I'm not one of those, everybody should give up alcohol forever type of people. But I think they weren't kind of staunch enough in terms of just saying, hey, if you have any risk factors for heart disease, if you have heart disease, or if you're worried about it, you should probably just not drink. And that's probably the best. I mean, zero alcohol is probably the best if you're really concerned about heart health. But let's maybe tie in the athletic aspect of this for a second. I think that if you are engaging in healthy lifestyle habits, you're exercising for 5 or more hours per week, your diet is pretty dialed in, you're eating well, I think that can offset a lot and kind of sort of allow you to, enjoy a couple drinks per week, maybe a few more than that, without maybe some of these, negative health aspects. So that's not to endorse it, but, everybody, likes to indulge every now and then. And I think that if you're living an otherwise healthy lifestyle, there's that social aspect of alcohol. There's the fact that it can help some people relax. So there's certainly some redeeming qualities of it that aren't related to just our physiological health.
Well, I think that's a really important point. I was going to ask you about it. Like, how does this apply? Obviously, we're talking about like a general recommendation to what I would presume would be the sedentary population, and sort of a recommendation which is blanket. I guess the question is like, how does alcohol actually impact the heart or the cardiovascular system? Like, are you happy just to give a very quick sort of, synopsis of how is it proposed, or how physiologically does alcohol impact the cardiovascular system?
When you drink alcohol, so it's broken down into this molecule called acetaldehyde, and that is kind of physiologically toxic at, obviously the dose makes the poison, but it is toxic to cells. So it will cause endothelial dysfunction. So your blood vessels just, don't work it properly. Just adverse effects on the actual like cardiac tissue and things like that. So there's actually, when you digest or when you metabolize alcohol, what it's metabolized into actually just seems to have kind of direct effects on adversely affecting the heart, blood vessels, and things like that. There are also kind of indirect mechanisms as well. And, that could be through possibly weight gain, which is not good for heart health. I mean, I feel like you have to drink a lot to sort of actually gain weight just by drinking alcohol. But if you combine alcohol with drinking or eating, certain foods, then that could potentially have some sort of a compounding effect. But it also shuts off fat burning. So perhaps, there's that indirect way it could possibly influence body weight, but most of it is through those direct kind of toxic effects of that molecule acetaldehyde that I mentioned.
Well, I always say that to athletes because they ask, the alcohol's making me fat. And I'm like, it's probably not the alcohol making you fat, because the reality is you can't store alcohol. Like, your body can't. So it's going to prioritize that. And I think the point you made there is what you eat when you have alcohol, because alcohol, one of the main effects of alcohol is lack of inhibition. And so you have this, suddenly you've gone from, I only eat salads because I'm on the Fuel In program, and I'm getting told that I need to be really eating my 9 serves of sort of leafy greens a day and being conscious of the quality of carbohydrates coming in. You have a few drinks, maybe it's even one glass of wine or one beer, and suddenly that little, Scott on the shoulder saying, hey, you probably shouldn't eat the pizza or the burger, because it's not in line with what you're trying to achieve, it sort of goes out the window. And so it's those extra calories, I think, that make the difference with alcohol consumption. And certainly that's what we see.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's a good point, and probably, again, a totally indirect mechanism by which that's happening. But I don't completely know, the mechanism behind this, but I think that there is sort of this synergistic effect where alcohol's changing the way you metabolize your food. So if you eat a greasy burger with, a side of a large fry and a milkshake, okay, that might not be ideal. Maybe if you're in the Tour de France, that's probably a great recovery meal. But if you eat that, okay, probably not great. But if you combine it with a couple of beers, it's probably even worse. And I think, again, it's because alcohol is going to, your body's going to preferentially metabolize that alcohol instead of the food. So the food's going to go to storage. You're going to metabolize that alcohol first because it's quick. Your body just like burns up that alcohol. So I think it's like changing the metabolism of that food and probably directing more of it to storage and promoting weight gain in that way as well.
100%. That's exactly the mechanism. It's preferential to alcohol, then carbohydrate, protein, and then, you've actually done on terms of metabolic, burn. Okay, we're just going to prioritize storing any of the fat that you've consumed, regardless if it's good fats or bad fats. And so I think that's that's my understanding of how alcohol really has an impact on, say, weight gain and body composition changes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unless someone's drinking, 5 to 10 drinks a day, like a couple drinks a day even would be 200, 300 kcals maybe. If you're an athlete, you're not going to be gaining weight just because of that alcohol.
No, I mean, if you look at an alcoholic, they're not fat a lot of the time because actually, I mean, it may be because of the socioeconomic sort of situation as well. If they're just prioritizing drinking the alcohol without eating the food, they don't gain weight. And I think that's probably the big telltale sign for people. It's what you do with the alcohol that probably has the biggest impact on you. And again, we're talking about that, the secondary impact of alcohol and how it could adversely affect health. I guess the question is like, and you sort of talked about it there, is like, if you are engaged in athletic performance, exercise 5 hours a week, which would be probably just on sort of the American Health or the Australian Health sort of medical association, recommendation for exercise, and think about all the mechanisms and the benefits of exercise. Does it offset alcohol completely?
I wouldn't say completely, but I certainly think that it could a little bit because, I mean, if you think about it sort of like, logically, like let's take all the ways that alcohol is negatively affecting, like we just talked about, the heart health. Well, exercise is sort of opposite to all of that. It improves your endothelial function. It improves your cardiac capacity. And so, I mean, in a way, if we like think about the mechanisms, like this isn't to say, balance out your alcohol with your exercise with your alcohol. But I think that one could make the case that, yes, you could probably, quote unquote, get away with a few drinks maybe per week if you're exercising because you're enhancing your health in one ways and then maybe doing some negative things with the alcohol in it. So I certainly think that there is an aspect of exercise that can offset some of the effects of alcohol, just like it offsets some of the effects of like a bad diet. I mean, you should eat great as, nobody knows this better than you, Scott. You should eat great as an athlete so you can fuel your body and perform. But yeah, it allows you the wiggle room to indulge a little bit in, some ice cream or a burger or something like that. So I definitely think it allows it to offset that. And it's funny, there was this article I wrote about a few years ago, and it was just looking at, it was all about athletes and runners, particularly in alcohol, because there's sort of this licensing effect that comes with heavy exercise where, I just ran a marathon, so I'm going to let myself have, 2 or 3 beers, or even just like working out day to day. You kind of allow yourself to eat something you might not, or drink a little extra. And so I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, but it may explain the reason why athletes may tend to drink a little bit more, maybe like endurance athletes at least, drink a little bit more than average or than one might expect because they kind of want to allow themselves a little treat or celebration, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's that psychology of it, isn't it? It's the mindset, well, I did this, so I can do this.
Right.
And yeah, it's a hard one to sort of get your head around. I mean, I know like we're talking about heart disease here, but if you also take a step back with alcohol, like its impact, and I guess with, in relation to HRV and resting heart rate, like what are you seeing around the research and from personal experience with alcohol and how it's impacted? Does it have an impact on you first and foremost if like you're tracking things like your resting heart rate and HRV?
I track it. I wear an Oura ring, so I'm able to sort of track that stuff and tag if the days that I've had alcohol. Yep, nice fellow Oura ring user. Yeah. So you're able to tag, when you've had alcohol, what time you've had alcohol, and it certainly affects me. But as you may have seen, Scott, with your own experiences, like the timing certainly matters for me. So if I have alcohol within a couple hours of going to sleep, yeah, boom, definitely reduction in HRV usually, but certainly an elevation of body temperature and definitely a 5 to 10 beats per minute increase in resting heart rate. That depends, obviously. It's a little scale with how much I've had. So I've definitely experienced that personally and seen it in my own data, or will even tell you it kind of trends, which is kind of scary. But I think the data would support that as well. Increased resting heart rate overnight. I mean, it worsened sleep, worsened HRV. But then I don't think I get that same thing during the day. So if I have a beer at noon with lunch or something on a weekend, of course, I'm not drinking with lunch during the work week. Or even like, a 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock happy hour. And then you have dinner afterwards. You have like 4 or 5 hours before bed. I don't seem to get the same effect. So day drinking, not as detrimental probably. I think the closer you drink to sleep, the worse it's going to be generally.
Yeah, I wrote an article. I think it's either, I'm pretty sure it's Training Peaks, but I wrote about my experience with alcohol, with abstaining from alcohol and then, restarting and looking. I've got about 4 or 5 years worth of data on Aura, and, whether the HRV readings are, within clinical standards or not, I'm still, a little bit undecided, but I think the resting heart rate and the body temperature one are pretty good. And I certainly see exactly what you reported. If I drink at night, again, dose dependent, but huge jumps in 10 beats per minute on resting heart rate. HRV can lose at least 50%, and body temperature can jump 0.1, 0.2 degrees. So I think it certainly has an impact on sleep, and I think it just, you look at your sleep metrics then about like how many times you woke up and all that, and it just doesn't seem to have any benefit in the evening, unfortunately. Even one drink, it impacts me. And I think this then comes down to the individual. Some individuals will say, it doesn't impact me at all. Now, whether they're tracking or whether that's purely subjective and they're just saying, but I think for me, myself, like I know that if I have more than one drink in the evening, it's certainly going to have a negative impact on the following day.
Me too. And to return to just briefly what you said about how does alcohol negatively affect heart health? I think for heart health, but all these other health outcomes, I think about what percent of that is attributed to sleep disruptions, because poor sleep is associated with poor heart health,
massive risk factor.
Everything.
Massive risk factor for everything.
If you're drinking and you're getting bad sleep because of that drinking, I think that has that downstream effect of the sleep is then going to lead to poor heart health down the line. I think that's probably a huge and underappreciated mechanism.
Well, you're opening a can of worms now, because I was actually chatting to the guys from Aura, and we were chatting about Fuel In and Aura, and I'd love to do something with them. But what's always referred to is, nutrition can cause bad sleep. And that's pretty well researched. And I think a lot of people understand that, you eat poorly or you drink poorly and it's going to have a negative impact on sleep. But it's also the other bidirectional aspect of sleep. If you have poor sleep, it actually has a negative impact on nutrition by creating this hedonistic drive where you actually then search out fatty and sugary and salty foods. And so your choice the next day is then negatively impacted. So, and then if you think about that, how is that going to impact heart disease over time? Well, if you're constantly searching out the breakfast burrito that's from, the local cafe, or you're going to Hungry Jack's or Macca's or whatever, because you're trying to fill that void in you because you just, you're probably a little bit hungover and you're a little bit tired or whatever. Over time, it's that accumulation that's going to have the negative impact on your health. I think health in general, but also specifically heart health.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's like impossible to untangle all this stuff, or disentangle all this stuff rather. I think all of it's definitely at play for sure. But I think the sleep thing is fascinating that you mentioned. So I'll have to catch that episode with them, because it's a bidirectional relationship. Yeah, you completely eat poorly, you sleep bad, but yes, we know that sleep via all those mechanisms is probably going to cause you, if you sleep poorly or don't sleep at all, to eat worse the next day.
Yeah, look, I think it's just scratching the surface at the moment in terms of that. And I think that the real it's certainly where we want to go with this, with Fuel In, is be able to show actually the impact of sleep on nutrition, but nutrition on sleep. And I think we'll be able to do that through AI, and be able to, I mean, we've got millions of data points now, and it's sort of like now it's just bringing the picture together, which I think is super exciting because that's just not being done.
It is exciting. There are so many tools in addition to, Fuel In, and Aura is releasing a bunch of stuff with metabolic health, CGM. So
Yep.
I just think it's fun to have all this data at our fingertips, and eventually we'll learn a lot from it and be able to change habits for the better.
No, for sure. If we're talking about athletes, we're talking about heart health, and we're obviously talking about alcohol. So let's say an athlete does consume alcohol, they exercise, so they're like, I'm pretty healthy. What would be your recommendations around screening then, based on, and whether you have any insights on screening? We certainly do some recommendations to athletes to try and look at health, their underlying health in relation to their heart. Do you have any recommendations based on the research?
Yeah, that one I'm probably not as maybe up to date on. I mean, I think doing maybe a regular blood panel just to make sure your traditional blood markers are in play could be good. I mean, if an athlete is interested and it's just particularly their heart health, I mean, now you can probably, it's going to, probably cost some out of pocket, but you could get something like a coronary artery calcium scan. That might run you a pretty penny because they're not cheap, or something like a cardiac MRI if you have a family history of heart disease or something like that. But I don't think currently maybe there are great biomarkers to say like, yeah, you're drinking too much or you're not. I mean, just, monitor your general, I think, health biomarkers, and that should pretty much take care of it. But maybe you're aware of something that might be a better predictor that I'm not.
No, I think, look, I mean, my understanding is they're looking at more of these markers that relate to the stability of plaque. And there's some of these oxidative stress markers, but they're not standard. I think, again, to your point, what we tend to recommend is look at a full lipid panel, including ApoB and LP(a). And I think, you've only got to listen to Peter Attia bang on about that as like complete risk factors. And I think it makes sense. Look, your ApoB, you can certainly impact through lifestyle. Your LP lipoprotein A is non-modifiable. And I think that's a really good risk factor, like marker. You're like, okay, wow, it is really high. What am I going to do now? Is drinking potentially a risk factor I don't have to have? As you said, if you've got a history of heart disease, that's the biggest risk factor for heart disease, like a family history. And then I think things like your calcium score, your CT calcium score makes complete sense. If you don't have a score of 0, okay, now you're escalating sort of investigations. So I think they're really interesting. I think things like your A1C, again, let's not think in silos here. It's not just cholesterol. How does your A1C, your blood sugars actually impact sort of inflammation? I think that's really important. I really like the omega-3 index. There's the Boston Health Heart Check. I think it's a full, complete panel that they do in America, and I love that. When I think an athlete once sent it to me, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. So I think looking at that is really interesting, and it's really actionable. And does it relate directly to alcohol? No. Does it relate potentially to heart health? Yes, based on the research I've seen. So I like that one as well. They're probably the main ones. And then, as you said, you get a complete blood count and everything else, your biochemistry, and make sure you get that done. If you're an athlete, I think, every 6 months makes sense.
I think it makes sense too. I will mention one more thing, and this isn't necessarily a biomarker, but everybody has something nowadays, either an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring. I guess Oura Ring doesn't do it, but Whoop Strap, where it will, it has a pretty good ability to detect atrial fibrillation, and I think for endurance athletes who are already at risk of atrial fibrillation compared to the normal population, and then alcohol further raising the risk of AFib, I think that's just potentially something to be aware of. And, if your watch isn't telling you have it, then great. But potentially, you can even buy something on Amazon now where you put your fingers on it basically, and it'll tell you if you're in AFib or not. So potentially just a screening tool. Like if you're concerned, you have a family history of, is alcohol compounding it? Am I at risk for it? So that can be something people can look out for as well, that we have the ability to measure now just with these consumer wearables is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I didn't know. Aura doesn't do that, do they? Or not?
It doesn't, unfortunately. No, I think hopefully that's something they introduce eventually. I mean, I feel like the technology is probably in the ring to do it. So they just need to update the the firmware or something like
but
that.
Apple Watch now and will what alert the individual if they're in AFib?
It will, yeah. It'll alert you if you're in AFib. So I think you could probably just do a test on your own to see if you're in it, but generally it'll alert them. And yeah, I mean, a personal like anecdote there. My dad has an Apple Watch, and it's alerted him several times that he has been in AFib, and it was like kind of what diagnosed him of AFib. So kind of fascinating technology that we can just have all this stuff on our wrists. And I know Whoop can do it now. I know they're even measuring blood pressure now with some of their devices, which is wild.
I mean, and this is, the thing about wearables that always makes me laugh. People wear the wearables, but they don't do anything with the information. They just look at it and go, oh yeah, whatever. Like I had a crap night's sleep. I had 6 hours sleep. They don't think about why they had a bad night's sleep and then try to implement, okay, maybe I need to get to bed 2 hours earlier in order to bump that up to a minimum of 7 hours. And it's like, if you're going to bother wearing a wearable, do something with the data. And back to alcohol, I think, honestly, that was one of the biggest shifts for me. It was seeing how bad my sleep was, how much it impacted my resting heart rate and my HRV. And as a result, like coming from a culture of rugby and college and everything like that, it was like we just drank. Like we did, and it's had a very meaningful impact. And I will say, like 100%, it's had a very significant impact on, I believe, my health, but just in life in general. So it makes me sound like I was probably an alcoholic, but I wasn't. But, like the notion of like 1 or 2 drinks wasn't even a thing. Like even probably back to the way that recommendations were said that 2 to 3 drinks probably wasn't anything to be concerned about. Well, actually, I think the statement is a breath of fresh air in saying, actually, it's probably 1 drink is about as much as you need on a daily basis. And I would say to that, 1 a day is probably 1 too many.
I think so too. I mean, dramatic. I was never been really a heavy drinker. I think the most ever, a couple times a week, maybe 2 to 3 drinks. But even me thinking now about somebody saying that 2 to 3 drinks a day every day for a week is like moderate drinking. I mean, it kind of blows my mind. I mean, I just think about how I would be operating and functioning if I drank 3 drinks every single day. It's crazy to me to think about it. I mean, of course, there's the aspect of tolerance with alcohol, but it's absurd to think about. I mean, 21 drinks per day being week. Sorry, not per day, but per week being somewhat normalized. It's I don't know. I think it's something we're working to denormalize, which is great, but it's an astounding amount of alcohol if you think about it.
Yeah, I think when you take the step back and look at complete volume and its consistency over time, then you go, wow, that is actually a lot of alcohol. I mean, whilst we're on the alcohol bandwagon, I mean, it's interesting looking at changing perception, and you've only got to look at the rise of non-alcoholic beers, and I have been one to embrace them. The reality is I like the taste of beer, and I like having a cold beer, especially in summer in Australia where it's bloody hot. There's nothing better than having a cold tinny afterwards, but like these non-alcoholic beers are great. I mean, you have it, you feel like you're drinking a beer, you don't get any of the negative side effects. I mean, it's just win-win. And some of them don't even have, I can think of Yarn's beer Thrive over in Europe. It's got 10 grams of protein in it, which is astounding. And then, most of the beers here, I mean, when they originally came out, they sort of had 20, 25 grams of carbs. Now they're sort of down to 15, between 15, 17 grams of carbs. So you're not even really layering yourself up with extra carbohydrates or added sugars. So it's great.
No, it is great. There's a lot of good alternatives. And I embrace the non-alcoholic beers too. They still don't get you, the same just satisfaction. I'm like, every now and then you just need the real thing. But when you want something cold, when you want something that's not just water, seltzer or something like that, it's a good alternative for sure.
Yeah, I think, and I agree with you. There's definitely something psychological about a real beer, and maybe it is the taste, or maybe it's just that that it's not a real beer. But I think mixing them up as well, like I'll often start with a non-alcoholic, and then you sort of mix and match, and it just works well. So, it's an interesting space.
Strategy.
It doesn't always work though. Okay, let's shift gears and let's talk about ketones. I think ketones.
It's a good segue from alcohol to ketones because they're so They're so interrelated.
It is something I think it was one of your articles that you had written about, and I can't remember which one it was. And then you'd said like something about like you use ketone IQ, and I think I messaged you and said, well, you do know that if you drink enough of those, it will pretty much you'll get intoxicated. And you were like, yeah, I know that. That's why I don't have it before exercise. I have it afterwards. Let's touch on that. So. Give me your take on ketones and maybe the difference between the esters and the diols.
The ketone space is so interesting because I think it was like one of the first topics that I really started writing about when I was blogging in graduate school and started writing about science, where the esters were just coming out. They were like a new thing. The Tour de France riders were apparently using them in secret, and they were kind of marketed as this performance enhancing aid. And so I was writing about some of the research on that, which was kind of compelling. And then over the last like decade, I mean, they haven't been around maybe that long even, but past 6 to 8 years or whatever, the research has just been so underwhelming, as I'm sure you know, in terms of the performance enhancement stuff. It's just like, they're not doing anything for performance. It's kind of disappointing, I think, but I don't think that makes ketones useless. So I'll definitely talk about that. But yeah, so the esters, I mean, I think that there's
hold on, stop. Just before you get into ester dial, like your point there, it just rings so true of me, and it just pisses me off that we still have athletes promoting that they're dropping these things before exercise and during exercise, and it's having a performance enhancing effect. And I just want to call it out that based on the research, that is absolute BS. And it's like, it's so disappointing to see these athletes doing this when it's clear, well, from what I can see in the research, and you can say if I'm wrong, but there does not appear to be any performance enhancing effect from ketones before or during exercise.
Yeah, it's what I see in the research too. I mean, the original study, I think maybe even from 2018, was like, taking the ester before it was like an 80 to maybe even a 2-hour exercise session, basically improves your time to exhaustion at the end of that session by, a significant amount. But then they tried, several studies trying to replicate it using high intensity exercise. The thinking was that, and kind of still is almost, that they have like this glycogen sparing effect because you're going to use the ketones, you're going to save your glycogen for the end when you need it. I think there have been plenty of studies showing now they're not really having a glycogen sparing effect during exercise. And so all the performance literature and this is, again, I'll caveat this with like, I use ketones all the time. So I think there are use cases for them, but they're not a ergogenic aid. You don't take it before exercise. Doesn't seem like it's going to help you based on the research. It might, in some cases, there have been performance decrements that have shown, especially during high intensity exercise, which physiologically kind of makes a lot of sense. And it's actually one of the reasons I don't use them during exercise, but only kind of after for recovery. Because if you just think about when you're doing high intensity exercise, or racing, what do you want to be doing? Well, you want to be burning carbs, your quickest source of energy. Our body turns carbs into, they're the diesel fuel that you want during high intensity exercise. Ketones really aren't that. You don't want to, burn body fat. You don't really want to go through this slower pathway of energy burning or reduce your glycolytic capacity. And so that's kind of been my like working hypothesis as to why these things are like inhibiting sort of high intensity exercise performance in some cases. I will note that there's one use case during exercise where I think there's kind of some promise, and that's for ultra endurance running, where they've done some studies showing they enhance dopamine, might make you think clearer. So I don't think it's a direct performance enhancing effect, but when you are exercising for 15 to 24 hours or more, there could be a potential benefit of them. So
was that on the ester or the dial? Because I'm just wondering whether that dopamine hit is just because they're getting a little bit of a buzz from the alcohol.
I think that one was actually using the butane dial. So not the ketone ester. So to your point, I think it's having the butane dial is going to have that cognitive effect. Yeah. So but if people are wondering what we're talking about, so the ketone esters, kind of the original ketones, BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate ester. That's the ketone that your body produces when you're in a ketogenic state, basically. Some of these newer esters, like the one from Ketone IQ, that's actually one that I use. I like Ketone IQ a lot. It's a butanediol, which is structurally similar. It's basically, an alcohol molecule. And as you mentioned, Scott, you take a few of those and you get a little bit of a buzz. And I think the ketone space then, where that company sort of started out and kind of where they still lean is like, oh, use this as a cognitive enhancer. And I use it. I love using it for like cognitive enhancement. If I have a podcast, if I'm working during the day, you need some energy. If you're like fasting or something, you take that and you really do. You feel a nice energy boost. Do I want to take that then before I go on a race when it might make me feel a little bit less coordinated or a little bit like, you're not taking a super high dose, but it's one reason I don't take it before like exercise and why I wouldn't probably recommend a lot of people taking it before exercise.
Yeah, a couple of things there. So the esters original, and so that all came out of Oxford, didn't it? That's Delta.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's Delta.
Yeah, Delta G. Yeah,
Delta
and actually,
G.
I mean, yeah, I think.
And my understanding is Ketone IQ used to sell the Delta G.
They did, yeah. When they were HVMN, before they went to Ketone IQ, they used to sell the Delta G2, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know the whole
I think it was
story behind it, but I think
it's
very expensive, and they patented it, I think. So
correct.
I think that Ketone IQ could probably no longer use it. So Delta G has the rights on that. It's a great product. I mean, I've used Delta G before and it's great. It freaking works. It puts you it gets my ketones up to like between 4 and 5 millimolar in like 30 minutes. But yes, it's dang expensive. So
it's very expensive, and my God, it tastes bad. I mean, I will say
they improved on the flavor a little bit. They have
the blueberry one. Yeah, I mean, I was chatting to Brian, the CEO
Brian's
of
great.
Delta. He's a great guy, and again, I'm not paid by any of these ketone companies, so I'm happy to just say whatever. But yeah, he gave me the tactical one as well, and my God, that is dead set jet fuel.
I have a funny story about the tactical one. So they sent me a bunch of them. So I had a thing of 12 of them in my fridge that I was using. And one day I was doing a bike ride out in the garage, and I was, a long duration bike ride on my trainer. And so I was like feeling a little low on energy. So I texted my wife and I said, hey, can you bring me one of those ketones in the fridge? And so she brought me the tactical one. I, unscrewed it, put it in my mouth, and oh man, I mean, it was the rankest tasting thing that I've ever had before. I mean, it did taste like I was doing a shot of
plain fuel
or something.
Like dead set plain fuel. I mean, not that I drink plain fuel all the time, but it's something that
I'm not sure what it tastes like, but that's, what I imagine.
I actually did a video of it, and Brian loved it, but like I was close to vomiting. I mean, it is. They're potent. Yeah. Fair play to anyone who takes them on a regular basis. But I mean, back to your point about the ketone IQ and the diol, so I guess what I'm interested in is that buzz, even at the low dose, is that due to the ethanol, or is there some other mechanism by which it's working on the brain?
Well, I think it's due to the ethanol one, but I also think ketones do kind of provide you with that similar buzz effect. And despite the fact that it's butanediol and the fact that it's, most of those shots from Ketone IQ have 5 to 10 grams of the ketones, they do raise your ketones to around, depending on, what the dose you take, but around 1 to 2 millimolar. So it puts you in a ketogenic state, and that will, your brain's going to be using those ketones and get that similar buzz. So I think it's the combination of the two.
Yeah, okay. Because I was reading and I was having a little bit of a back and forth with Brian, and he was saying if you actually took the 30 grams, which they recommend, then that really puts you in a state of like ethanol replacement. And you could use it in a social setting. Now, again, do you need to have 3 shots of Ketone IQ to get a buzz on, or could you just have maybe 1 or 2 shots of tequila? I guess it's same net, but maybe a bit cheaper and a bit nicer with the other one. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so use case for ketones at this point in time, before and during, probably not so much of a strong research or standing there. But what about like post? Because there has been some research, and apparently, according to Brian and Delta, there is some exciting studies coming out. What's your take on the research related to recovery and ketones?
Yeah, so apparently, I think there's some research coming out soon, maybe on the Ketone IQ as well. I was speaking with Michael Brandt, the CEO of Ketone IQ, so we may have some data on the esters and the diol soon. But yeah, where I'm really leaning towards being kind of bullish on this research is the ketones for post-exercise recovery, and potentially as just a daily supplement. So actually, I think I actually published a peer-reviewed article on this, not a study that I did, but it was sort of a commentary on an article where several years ago they gave these cyclists ketones during their training, and it prevented overtraining syndrome. Basically, they could just throw all this training at them, like however much they wanted, and they couldn't cause them to, they didn't develop any overtraining symptoms. And then the group who didn't get the ketones did. So that kind of, raised my eyebrows, like, oh, if you're in a heavy training block and just like taking ketones, again, if you have the budget to do this, they can be kind of expensive, but breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe doing it before sleep, it's actually something I've implemented in my own training. But recently,
was that esters? Was that esters or
it was with the it was with the ketone ester,
and
yeah.
That's my problem with this is like, and I will call out Ketone IQ on this because they will talk about research related to that, but then it's done on a different ketone. And I'm like,
yeah.
Until you publish,
it's important to discriminate.
Until you publish research on, your actual product, I don't think you can, I don't think you can be talking about the physiological impact of a product if it's not actually your product. So,
I agree, and to some extent, if it's not your product, but say taking your product does, because I think all that matters really is you got to get your ketones up. If you get the ketone levels in your body up, it doesn't matter how you do it. But so I think you could theoretically get to the same ketogenic state with the diol as you do with the ester, but you'd have to take 3 or 4 shots versus just 1 shot of the ester. So I think that's probably an important point. But I would totally agree. And full disclosure, I am affiliated with Ketone IQ, and I use their product and stuff like that. So, but I do think, if you're talking about research, you can't say, oh, this was done in the ester and it's going to apply to our product. And I think they're investing more in the science side now, which I think is good. But yeah, I would totally agree that we have to kind of be, if you see a study on ketones, we got to ask, like, what were they using?
Yeah, what was the product? What was the population?
Because they are different molecules. But in regards to the post-exercise recovery stuff, they're recently, have been some studies showing if you do the ketones with your post-exercise carbs and protein, you're sort of going to enhance muscle glycogen resynthesis. So I think that's very interesting. And so that's one of the reasons why I've implemented them in my training. Again, I think a lot of that research is using the esters at pretty high doses too, which is unfortunate because you see these studies and get really excited. And then you realize they were taking, 40, 50 grams of this stuff a day. It's like, man, I don't have the budget for that.
And because the tactical comes in at around, I think 12 or 15 grams.
Yeah, I think it actually might be 30. I think the tactical
30. Okay, but it's still 2 of those.
Right.
To hit the dose that these studies are doing. And it's like,
the most recent study that
you're now talking $90 a day.
Yeah.
$90. I mean, I don't know about you.
Nothing's worth that.
And then you got to weigh up. And this is the thing that, I get so many questions about ketones. Should I take them? Well, yeah, possibly. If you're doing all your training as laid out by your coach, you sleep at least, let's call it 8 hours a night, and you do that every night. You don't drink any alcohol. Your diet and your nutrition intake is bang on in terms of calories, in terms of protein intake, carbohydrate intake. Your timing of nutrition is exactly as we lay it out in Fueling. You're eating before, during, after, and your timing is all in line with optimizing sort of recovery and performance. All your blood markers look great, and you're doing everything from a basic supplementation protocol, with simple things like creatine monohydrate, omegas, maybe a quality protein supplement, whey or plant, depending on your personal preference. What else? And then you're surrounded by lots of friends and you've got a great community and you're doing that. And then, if you're doing all of that, okay, let's consider taking ketones. And then throw into that, are you at an optimal body composition as well? Like, I'm not talking like getting super lean, but are you at least in a very healthy range? Because a lot of the athletes that are asking about ketones, I will happily say probably aren't in optimal body composition state, but they want the easy option. And then they sort of look at me and go, oh, shit, no, I don't tick any of those boxes or half of those boxes. And I'm like, well, let's do that first. Let's focus on the low-hanging fruit, and then you can have the sprinkles on top at the end. And they're like,
that's great. It's a great framework to think about it because they are a significant investment. And I think that there are probably 5 to 10 supplements I'd put ahead of ketones. If someone were to say, oh, I have $50 a month to spend on supplements, what should I use? I mean, ketones are on that list, but they're definitely far down that list. And so, yeah, I think take care of everything else. And if you're thinking, okay, well, I'm kind of doing everything I can. And that's just sort of where I'm certainly not doing everything I can. I don't have everything optimized, but I kind of got to this point in my training where let's say I'm not going to run any more than I am doing right now. I'm not going to add any more cycling. My diet, I feel like, is pretty good. What else can I do? Could I eke out a tiny fraction of a percent to train a little bit harder by doing this ketone after my workout? Yes. And I don't think it's a massive difference, but what's important with all this research, whether it's on ketones or anything, and here's kind of how I think about it. We love to post, especially on social media, about, oh, ketones improved our endurance by X percent. That's great, but that was just from a single study. What I honestly only care about is like, what was the direction? Is the direction this tends to improve performance? Then great, I will use it. I don't really think about percents because those are going to differ between individuals. You look at the individual responses in a graph from any study, and it's this guy went up, this guy went down, this guy had no change. And so just like, do these maybe have a possibility to improve performance? The data indicates yes, so I'm going to use it because I have the disposable income, or at least the willingness to try it out. That's kind of how I think about supplements and how I tend to write about stuff versus just saying, oh, you'll take ketones, you're going to improve your performance by 10%. That's not true. It's not going to be true for everybody. So I don't think about it differently, but I love the framework that you just talked about. That's with most supplements, right? Should I take this? Maybe, but could you buy healthier food with that $50 a month? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and I think your framework is completely in line as well with mine. I mean, you're 220 marathoner, like, you know, you eat well, you're doing the training, you're consistent. Yeah, I'd say to you, hey, if you're trying to drop and you're trying to get that percentage drop, maybe ketones could be beneficial in terms of, you know, optimizing your recovery. Give them a go. Let's track that. Let's see what metrics we can look at over, you know, the next 30 to 60 to 90 days and see if it actually is meaningful. It's going to cost you some money, but if you're willing to do that, let's do it. But you're talking small percentage gains here. And I think That's what you've got to weigh up. And can you make, I mean, I was chatting to someone the other day and we were just doing a chat around Fuel In and what he was doing. And he said, like, you know, the thing is, he's a guy and he goes, you know, men will just happily spend money on equipment to try and make that change. And he's like, but it's not the thing that we should be. He's like, you know, focus on what's really going to make the difference. And more often than not, it's the three things we mentioned. It's the training, it's the nutrition, and then it's probably the sleep. And some of those things don't necessarily, I mean, yes, they will cost money in terms of good coaching and application, but like your time is the money that needs to be spent.
Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of things, yeah, maybe men especially, but I just think athletes in general love to see what else can I add to my training? What extra supplement can I buy? What extra piece of gear can I buy? Because let's be honest, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to supplement with stuff. It's fun to experiment. It's fun to buy gear, but in reality, yeah, making bigger changes. And I mean, even with the food aspect, which is interesting, like changing your diet in terms of how it'll affect your performance, I think you could have an impact, not just forget about what you're eating or how much you're eating, but just changing the timing of it to be better timed around exercise. Like that's a change that you can make. You don't have to spend a dime. You can eat the same thing every day, but just focus your calories around exercise, refuel plenty afterwards. That's something I'm certainly working on, but you don't even have to eat better, just eat at a better time. So There are definitely free strategies as well. There are plenty of them out there. They're just not as sexy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't have anything hanging on your wall behind you, and I don't really anything related to exercise, but that's the reality, isn't it? It's what you can hang behind you and say, I bought this, or post on Instagram. And you know, sometimes those changes that you do over time, they're just not that sexy, and it's sometimes difficult to get across that message, but it's what happens after that consistency that is really the thing that you can brag about. And I guess it's not instantaneous, and that's probably the biggest fault of something like, you know, quality sleep, quality nutrition, or quality training over time. It's an accumulative effect.
Absolutely. And just to, you know, maybe bring it back to ketones really quick, I think the cumulative effect is the thing that I'm kind of relying on with them and what the research might be. So you don't take this and just have superpowers. It's similar to I think it's very analogous to creatine as well. You don't take creatine and just like, oh, I hammered this workout now. Same thing with ketones, but if I'm able to train a little bit harder because I took the ketones and the creatine and recovered a little bit better, than after 3 marathon training blocks, I'm a way stronger runner. And maybe I did get 1% better, but it wasn't from that one time I took the ketone that I got 1% better. I was able to train a little bit harder for years and years and years. So consistency is always king, and just keep the habits going.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly the same for things like beta-alanine, isn't it? I mean, you see beta-alanine pop up in a lot of pre-workouts and people are like, yeah, I got the buzz. And you're like, yeah, but unfortunately you've got to take around 6.5 grams of that stuff every day for at least 30 days to actually get a benefit. And they're like, oh, and then you look at the product and it's like, it's got 1 gram in there per scoop. And you're like, yeah, you might want to increase that. And then they're like, but oh no, I can't do that. So it's.
Well, that's what kills me about creatine these days. It's like the most popular supplement, and people will talk about how they're going to take it before their workout and they're feeling this buzz. And I just want to say, well, that's not how creatine works. You're experiencing, it's the epitome of the placebo effect.
That's the caffeine. That's the caffeine in the pre-workout that's giving you the buzz.
Exactly. I'm like, you don't take a scoop of creatine and you don't feel anything. That's not how the freaking thing works. Yeah. So it bugs me when people are doing that, because I'm like, the fundamental mechanism of it is just like it saturates your muscles and makes you stronger. You don't get a buzz from taking a dry scoop of creatine. I'm sorry.
Last thing before we shut off, but did you see James Smith's thing around creatine gummies?
Oh, I did. Yes,
man, he slapped.
Huge scandal
so
in
good.
the creatine gummy world, man.
I mean, but his point, it's like, just get a teaspoon, get a white powder that is relatively cheap. A lot more expensive since Huberman talked about the benefits of creatine. But just get a teaspoon and mix it into your post-workout shake. Yeah. Why do you need gummies? Like, that would be my question. And
for sure.
You're not feeding them to your kids. So although there could be, you do hear some people talk about that creatine supplementation for children even could be of benefit. But regardless of that, it's like, why do you need gummies for creatine? And based on what he just showed, most of those gummies don't have any creatine in them whatsoever. And
it's crazy.
You're just wasting your money. Like, just buy a creatine monohydrate product. Buy it hopefully with Crea Pure, so that you're getting a quality creatine monohydrate product every time. You can have 5 grams per day.
I would agree. You're going to be safe with doing it. And I have packs of creatine gummies downstairs, and I do take them. I typically take both per day. So I'll take creatine monohydrate in my post-workout shake, and I'll kind of have a couple gummies maybe during a workout, maybe after a workout or something like that. And the brand that I use, which fortunately I was able to see in that analysis that I did, it was the Create brand of creatine gummies, and they actually did contain the creatine that they claimed. But it was insane to see some of those brands had zero creatine in those gummies.
Well, welcome to the world. Welcome to the world of supplementation and supplement companies, especially. Hate to say it. I mean, look, Australia is not as bad as America, but pretty much if you want to get a plastic tub and put a label on it, you can, and you can make whatever claims you want. So again, for any athletes out there or people exercising, look at where your product's coming from. Ideally have the NSF Sport stamp on it, Inform Sport or HASTA as a stamp of certification on what the product actually contains, because you might get tested, or worst case is you get tested and you get done for a banned substance. The other worst case is you're actually just throwing your money. I mean, creatine gummies aren't cheap from what I've seen. And so you're actually just eating a gelatin product, and God knows where that gelatin's even coming from. So, do yourself a favor and don't waste your money.
I would agree. Just do your research. Make sure you're getting what you think you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, mate, we covered 2 topics.
I think we did too. Yeah, not as many as we thought we might.
2 out of a possible 6, but I think we leave it there. I think there's so much to talk about, mate. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and I think listeners are going to love it. And the plan is we try and do one of these a month and just have a chit chat about what we're seeing in the research. Maybe talk about things that aren't as common. I know carbohydrates, protein, all that, everyone just talks about it, and I talk about it a lot. So I think having a different play on what we're seeing in the research is really interesting. If you've got comments, please leave it below on topics you'd like to hear more for Brady and myself to talk about. Other than that, mate, let's sign off and enjoy your evening. It's morning here in Australia, and I'll catch you soon.